At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. Concourse Primus's floor was Jonas Gable's canvas, and his industrial buffer his brush. He worked in light, reflecting it from the polished floor. The composite floor stretched out, its polished surface reflecting the soft, simulated starlight from the vaulted ceiling of Fulcrum, a diplomatic station the size of a respectable moon. A good polish rendered the stone a mirror for the heavens, a foundation for the galaxy's most important conversations. A scuff mark was a discordant note in a symphony of silent diplomacy. The one near the Asia Tapestry's base was a personal affront. A dark, rubbery smear, likely from a hurried AIDS graph card, clung to the stone. It defied the buffer's standard pads, a stubborn stain on perfection. Jonas sighed, the station's ambient hum absorbing the sound. He knelt, his knees popping, and produced a small canister of his own proprietary solvent from a loop on his belt. A dab on a microfiber cloth, a moment for the chemicals to work, and then a firm, circular motion. The scuff yielded. This was the part of his work he relished, the simple, tangible act of setting something right. The Asia Tapestry loomed over him, a living event given sculptural form. Its filaments, a woven light, drifted in a slow, perpetual dance with a containment field. A dark, rubbery smear, likely from a hurried AIDS graph card, clung to the stone. It defied the buffer's standard pads, a stubborn stain on perfection. Jonas sighed, the station's ambient hum absorbing the sound. He knelt, his knees popping, and produced a small canister of his own proprietary solvent from the loop on his belt. A dab on a microfiber cloth. A moment for the chemicals to work, and then a firm circular motion. The scuff yielded. This was the part of his work he relished, the simple, tangible act of setting something right. The Asia Tapestry loomed over him, a living event given sculptural form. Its filaments of woven light drifted in a slow, perpetual dance within a containment field. Each filament represented a signatory to the axiomal chords, and their harmonious movement was a visual metaphor for galactic peace. The tapestry was also priceless, irreplaceable, and profoundly delicate. A stray energy discharge could unravel it in seconds, which was why the screech of tortured metal and the panicked chirps of a service drone shattered the concourse's tranquility. Jonas looked up from his work, his brow tightening. A Goshawk-class sparring drone, a machine of interlocking limbs designed for training elite soldiers, rocketed down the concourse. Its optical sensors, normally a calm blue, pulsed with a furious, erratic red. It broke containment. With its lethal engagement protocols active, the machine skittered, its metallic claws gouging deep, ugly lines into a section of floor he just finished. A muscle near Jonah's eye pulsed. Then came the synchronized thunder of heavy footsteps. A squad of 12 Sidonian wardens, encased in resplendent armor that magnified their bulk, moved to intercept. Plates of polished chrome and gold inlay augmented their exoskeletons, which featured 2 additional articulated manipulator arms folded against the chest plate. The armor caught the station's light in blinding jewel-toned flashes. They moved in a tight wedge, a tactic for breaching fortified positions. Sidonian training manuals dictated the maneuver for open battlefields, rendering it unsuited for the cluttered concourse. The lead warden, a towering specimen of a Sidonian, brandished a ceremonial energy spike. His helmet, a marvel of defensive engineering designed to deflect energy blast, also gave him the peripheral vision of a tunnel. Jonas tracked the collision vectors, the drone, the wardens, the priceless tapestry. He mapped their intersection with the grim certainty of a past life he worked to forget. The drone, its logic circuits fried, made a direct course for the Asia Tapestry's shimmering light. The warden squad, focused entirely on their target, held a direct intercept course. Their path would take them right over his freshly cleaned patch of floor. Their heavy, magnetized boots would ruin everything. He acted to defend his work, a motive eclipsing all concern for the priceless artwork or scattering diplomats. His movements were spare, almost lazy, as Jonas stood, He held the thick, industrial-grade power cord of his buffer in both hands. He was in his mid-40s, with the unassuming build of a man whose most strenuous activity involved wrestling bags into trash receptacles. He understood leverage, momentum, and predictability. As the drone charged past, he yanked the power cord taut about ankle height. The speeding drone's sensors scanned too high. The cable snagged its lower limbs. It flipped forward, a chaotic whirl of flailing appendages and sparking circuits, and landed in a heap directly in the lead warden's path. The Sidonian, locked into his charge and blind to the sudden low-profile obstacle, plowed on. His heavy armored boots planted squarely on the drone's chassis. His ankle twisted, and he went down like a statue toppled from its pedestal. He crashed, his energy spike spinning from his grip, and slammed into the backs of two wardens directly behind him. His fall triggered a chain reaction. The Sidonian wedge, so impressive on an open parade ground, became a disastrous liability in the cluttered concourse. It was a domino rally of chrome and indignation. Wardens tripped over the drone, over the fallen commander, over each other. They became a tangle of limbs and armored manipulators. The rigid discipline of their unit cohesion worked against them, each soldier's attempt to maintain spacing only adding to the collective stumble. For 3 seconds, the concourse filled with the scrape of armor on stone and the grunts of flailing Sidonians. And in that chaos, Jonas moved. He stepped over the tangled power cord like it was a puddle. The lead warden's pike spun through the air, and Jonas caught it by the haft, its weight familiar in his hand. As the second warden, flailing for balance, swung his own pike wide, Jonas used the captured pike to hook the weapon, twist it, and lift it clean from the man's grasp with a flick of his wrist. The man, his balance already compromised, spun around and sat down hard, cocking his head behind his visor in stunned confusion. A third warden was trying to untangle his leg from a comrade's arm. Jonas used the downed man's pauldron as a stepping stone, reached over and unclipped the magnetic lock on the third warden's weapon harness. The energy rifle clattered to the floor. Jonas maintained his stride. He weaved through the pileup, a gentle push here, a redirected arm there. He used their own momentum, their own entanglement, their own rigid bulk against them. He unlatched another rifle, twisted a pike from a four-fingered grip, and palmed a sidearm from a thigh holster as the owner was trying to push himself up. Each weapon he removed was another scuff mark erased, a deliberate act of setting things right. By the time the drone circuits finished sparking, the encounter was over. The concourse fell silent, save the disabled drone's crackle and the groans of 12 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers trying to entangle themselves. Diplomats and aides stared, mouths open. Jonas Gable, custodial technician 3rd class, stood in the center of the mess, a small collection of Sidonian military hardware at his feet. He still held the first energy pike, resting its butt on the floor like a mop handle. He looked at the chaos, at the priceless untouched sculpture, and then down at the floor. Fresh black scuff marks, left by the Sidonian boots, now marred the area he just cleaned. He sighed, long and weary with profound disappointment. This fresh indignity soured his entire shift. Prefect Saline's office was a monument to order. Plain gray walls enclosed the space, and the desk a single slab of polished volcanic glass. A single personal console rested on its surface, perfectly aligned with the desk's edges. Even the air felt organized, scrubbed of any stray particles of dust or scent. From her seat in a chair more throne than office furniture, Saline radiated a silent stillness more intimidating than any shout. Her exoskeleton, a deep amethyst today, was so polished it reflected the room in distorted miniature. She rested her primary hands on the arms of her chair, her armor's two smaller secondary manipulator arms folded across her chest. She focused her large mirrored eyes, which reflected the room in disconcerting detail with flat, depthless stillness. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and two of her wardens, their armor now bearing several new undignified scratches, escorted the human in. They handled him with a ginger stiffness, like he might disassemble them with a paperclip and a harsh word. Jonas Gable shuffled in, looking less like a tactical genius and more like a man whose sandwich was getting cold, which it was. He glanced around the Spartan office, his expression one of mild disinterest. "Prefect Saline," a warden announced, then retreated, the door sealing Saline and the human in a tomb of awkward silence. Saline remained silent. She let the silence stretch, a common Sidonian interrogation tactic designed to unnerve an opponent. Jonas used the quiet to surreptitiously check a spot on his uniform sleeve. He rubbed at it with his thumb, then seemed satisfied. Saline spoke, her voice a low, resonant contralto, clipping each word. You, Alt Jonas Gable. Custodial Technician 3rd Class. Employment Contract Cycle. 4 Terran Standard Years, with a clean service record. That's me, Jonas said, his tone suggesting she had just read his grocery list. Look, if this is about the unauthorized use of the buffer's power supply, I can assure you it was a temporary measure to prevent damage to the station property. The paperwork is probably already on your console. He squinted at the desk. Or it will be once I file it. Saline flickered her mirrored eyes. Paperwork? She repeated, the word sounding like a foreign insult. You interfered with a grade 4 security operation involving an unstable prototype. You assaulted, disarmed, and publicly humiliated 12 wardens of the Sidonian Mandate. Assaulted is a strong word, Jonas countered. More like reoriented. They tangled themselves. I helped untangle them, mostly. And they dropped their things. I just picked them up. Clumsy armor. You should look into something with better articulation around the joints. A wider field of view for the helmet might help too. He paused. Also, they scuffed my floor. Saline's primary hands clenched into fist. He stood before the commander of Fulcrum's entire security force and critiqued their equipment while complaining about a smudge. We train all wardens from hatching in numerous forms of Sidonian combat, she said, her voice low, each word a sharpened edge. They calculate firing solutions in their minds while executing zero-gravity maneuvers. They embody centuries of Sidonian discipline and honor. They're also a textbook example of what happens when a rigid tactical doctrine meets an unpredictable obstacle, Jonas said, shrugging. They zigged, the drone zagged, and they all ended up in a heap. It happens. Now, if I could just get a chit to requisition a new buffer pad, that drone did a number on the bristles. Before Saline could respond, a soft chime filled the office. A red alert symbol flashed on her personal console, a pulsing icon signifying a Priority 1 crisis. She forgot the janitor on his floor. This was the alert for a diplomatic incident. She tapped the console, her movement sharp and direct. A file bloomed across the screen. Security reports, frantic communiques, a grainy image from a residential corridor. Prefect. The voice of her second-in-command crackled from the console speaker. We have confirmed abduction. Amaranth Ward, residential wing. The victim is Karis, daughter of Ambassador Hespar from the Per Se Trade Compact. Saline's insides went cold. Ambassador Hespar was famously mercurial, and his trade compact was negotiating a treaty that would stabilize 3 galactic quadrants. His daughter was, in essence, a supremely valuable political asset on the entire station. Security response? She demanded. Negative, Prefect. The abductors were clean. They used credentials forged with a stolen diplomatic encryption key to access the wing. The perpetrators bypassed all alarms. The ambassador's report was the first alert. They had at least a 20-minute head start. Saline processed tactical scenarios, deployment patterns, station lockdowns. This was a sophisticated silent abduction. She was about to issue a dozen orders when she settled her gaze upon the unassuming human still standing in her office. He was looking at her console, head tilted, his eyes tracking the data streams. Well, Jonas said, breaking the silence. Looks like you've got a busy day. He gestured toward the door. So, about that buffer pad. Saline stared at him as a terrible, brilliant, and humiliating idea formed. The Fulcrum Central Command Nexus was the station's beating heart, a vast chamber where holographic displays shimmered, and dozens of technicians from a multitude of species monitored the flow of galactic traffic, diplomacy, and life support. Saline stood at the main tactical table, where targeting solutions and station telemetry flooded the holographic field. Kira Mesa, report, she commanded. Kira Mesa, a younger Sidonian whose exoskeleton was a burnished bronze, manipulated the holographic battlespace. Her movements were faster, less rigid than her prefects. We've identified the abductor's ship, an old modified freighter, the Vagrant. It's running dark, but we have its last known trajectory. They're heading for the outer rim, likely the Shambles. A star chart materialized over the table, a dotted line showing the freighter's escape vector. The abductors? Saline asked.
Scans of their credentials cross-referenced with Intel databases give us a probable match, Kuramesa said, zooming in on several files projected in the air. They showed images of several aliens, all with extensive records. The Marrow Dogs, a smuggling ring known for high-risk acquisitions, a disorganized, opportunistic, and notoriously violent crew.
Sailing studied their file. Their methods, varying from brute force to electronic stealth, showed no apparent pattern. The tactics are chaos. Sidonian doctrine is order, she murmured, more to herself than to her subordinate. How do you predict chaos?
Prefect, a soft, synthesized voice announced from her personal comm unit. The station administrator, a non-corporeal intelligence inhabiting Fulcrum's core network, spoke from her personal comm unit.
A word, if I may.
Administrator? Sailing acknowledged, her posture stiffening.
I have reviewed the incident in Corncors Primus,
the voice said, its tone flatly factual,
as well as the preliminary report on the abduction of the ambassador's daughter. I note the perpetrators relied on misdirection and a subversion of standard security protocols.
We are already adapting our response, Administrator, Sailing said, her jaw tight.
Indeed, the voice hummed. I also note how decisively custodial technician Gable responded to the drone. His approach instantly exploited a vulnerability in a predictable system, a skill that might prove useful.
The administrator's words landed with the weight of an execution order.
The ambassador is a key figure, the administrator continued. A public failure would be catastrophic. The warden's renown stems from their systematic excellence. However, this situation may call for a more creative approach. I strongly suggest, Prefect, that you avail yourself of every available asset, including your new unconventional tactics consultant.
The connection closed. Sailing stood frozen for a moment as her command staff watched her. She rebelled against the idea, a violation of her honor, her training, her entire worldview. Consulting a janitor, a sloppy, sarcastic primate who had accidentally bested her finest soldiers? The administrator's logic was sound. The Marrow Dogs were unpredictable. Her methods were failing. The human had looked at her console, his expression focused, analytical. A pattern emerged for him from what she perceived as only chaos.
Kuramesa,
Sailing said, her voice tight. Bring me the human. Her career, it seemed, now depended on a man whose primary concern was the structural integrity of a mob. Jonas was on his hands and knees, meticulously applying a sealant to the hairline cracks left by the sparring drone's claws, when two wardens found him. They stood over him, their shadows falling across his work.
The prefect wants to see you,
one of them said. His stiff posture and clipped tone conveyed his resentment. This was a warden from the pile-up.
Tell her I'm busy,
Jonas said as he fixed his gaze on the sealant.
This compound needs to set at least 20 minutes before I can buff it. It's a delicate process.
It's in order.
Jonas sighed and sat back on his heels, wiping his hands on a rag.
Look, I'm sorry about your collective faceplant earlier, but I've got a job to do. A job that your malfunctioning hardware and subsequent synchronized tumble made significantly harder. They escorted him once again to Sailing's office. This time, the prefect was standing, pacing the length of her volcanic glass desk.
Gable, she began, dispensing with any formality. I require your assistance.
My assistance?
Jonas asked, feigning surprise. Did someone spill something in a hard-to-reach area? Because for that, you'll need to file a work order with Custodial Command. Form 12C, I believe. My concern is with the diplomat's daughter, Sailing snapped. Someone has abducted her. We are mounting a recovery mission. My superiors have advised me to include you. Jonas stared at her. For a moment, his lazy posture straightened. The sarcasm fled his expression, replaced by weary, calculating stillness. Her posture broadcast desperation, her jaw rigid with loathing for the situation. He recognized that look. He had seen it on the faces of commanding officers who were out of their depth.
No,
he said. Sailing stopped pacing. What?
No, thank you. I'm a janitor. My skills are in sanitation, not security. He turned to leave.
I can offer you a bonus, she said. A substantial one.
Jonas paused at the door, his back to her. I have no need of it.
A commendation, a promotion. You could head the entire custodial division. Too much paperwork, he replied, reaching for the door panel. Saling's patience broke. Fine, she growled. Let us forego the pretense of negotiation. You interfered with a security operation. You performed unauthorized handling of military-grade assets. These are serious charges, technician, the penalty for which, at minimum, is immediate termination of your employment contract and summary eviction from the fulcrum. Jonas froze, his hand over the panel. He turned back to face her, his movements measured. His quiet life, constructed from anonymity and floor wax, was under threat. He had to play along. He sized her up. Raw desperation warred with her professional pride. Her team's predictable actions would endanger the girl. A deep, familiar weariness washed over him. All right, he said, holding up a hand. The word felt dry in his mouth. I'll help. On my terms. Saling narrowed her eyes. Specify. 1. My way. I see a problem. I suggest a solution. You listen. You may refuse, but only with a better reason than adherence to doctrine. She hesitated, her entire being rebelling against the notion of ceding tactical command to a civilian. But she was desperate. Acceptable. 2. Address me as a consultant. I will act as a consultant, separate from your command structure. Decorum noted, she said dryly. Agreed. And 3. Jonas said as he locked his eyes with hers, a flicker of the man he used to be surfacing for a moment. If I say duck, you hit the deck. Immediately. All of you. Saling stared at him, baffled by the strange, specific command. For a moment, something hard and unforgiving surfaced in his eyes. The memory of a past failure. Agreed, she conceded. Good, Jonas said, his demeanor shifting back to that of a put-on employee. Now, where are we going? I need to know if I should pack a heavy-duty degreaser. The patrol ship, the Vigil, was a Sidonian vessel through and through. Its corridors were immaculate, its lighting cool and efficient, and the air hummed with the sound of perfectly calibrated machinery. The air held the scent of active circuitry and the faint mineral tang of polished armor. Jonas shuffled along the immaculate corridors, a smudge in a sterile world. He followed Celine and Kuramesa onto the bridge, where a handful of wardens stood at their post. Every warden on the bridge stiffened as he entered, their gazes hostile. The floor plates could use a polish, Jonas muttered, running his shoe over the matte gray surface. Celine ignored him, gesturing to the main holographic display. Kuramesa, brief him. Kuramesa brought up the file on the Marrow Dogs. Mug shots and grainy security footage filled the air. We've established the target vessel in the Vagrant, en route to the Shambles. The dogs are multi-species smuggling crew led by a Lothian named Falk. His file indicates a preference for smash-and-grab operations. She highlighted a series of past crimes, a bank robbery on Ashgar where they blew the main vault door while simultaneously setting off diversionary explosives on the city's other side. An art heist where they triggered a fire alarm in one museum wing to draw security away from the wing they were actually targeting. A corporate data theft where they initiated a massive denial-of-service attack on the company's public servers, providing cover for a single hacker to slip through a maintenance port. The history is one of chaos, Saling concluded, her primary arms crossed. The targets and methods appear random, a display of tactical chaos. Jonas leaned against the console, looking bored. Now he pushed himself off it and walked toward the display. You're looking at it wrong, he said. Saling's jawplates tightened. Enlighten us, technician. You're focusing on the noise, Jonas said, pointing a finger at the bank robbery hologram. They blew the vault. Loud, obvious. Everyone looks at the big boom, but the manifest from that day shows someone also opened a small secure deposit box using a quiet bypass. The box contained bearer bonds worth 10 times what was in the main vault. He swiped his hand, bringing up the museum heist. Fire alarm in the east wing. Big response. Flashing lights, lots of shouting. Everyone runs that way. But the real target was a small historical text from the West Wing archives. They unlocked the case. They just walked out the front door while everyone was looking at the fake fire. He kept going, crime after crime, pointing out the same pattern. a loud, dramatic, and often violent diversion designed to mask a quiet, subtle, and far more valuable objective. They orchestrate chaos, Jonas finished, turning to face the stunned Sidonians. They are misdirection artists more than smugglers. They always hide the real objective behind the spectacle. Kura Mesa stared at the display, rapidly recontextualizing the data.
He's right, she whispered, her voice tight with revelation. The meta-strategy is the pattern.
Saline remained silent. She stared at the human janitor, who just dissected a complex criminal operation with the ease of a man identifying a type of stain. She reevaluated him, the contempt in her thoughts momentarily silenced by a grudging, unsettling respect. Saline respected Jonas's analysis, but she needed to understand the man himself. His economy of motion during the concourse incident suggested training, a deliberate skill beyond mere luck. She found him in the Vigil's training room, examining the control panel for the holographic combat simulators. I assume you have some form of combat training, Gable, she said, her voice echoing the large, empty chamber. Well, I know which end of a mop gets dirty, he replied, his back to her. That's about it. I doubt that, Saline said, stepping onto the glowing combat mat. Indulge me. Weapons aside, hand to hand. Jonas turned, sighing. Look, Prefect, my purpose here is consultation, not games. Consider this part of your job, she insisted. I need to gauge the capabilities of my consultant. She settled into a classic Sidonian starting stance. Lower body braced as she held her arms high for striking, the armor's limbs held low for defense, posture perfected by centuries of martial training. Jonas just stood there, his posture slumped, looking like a man waiting for a transport. Fine, but if I pull a muscle, it comes out of your operational budget. Celine moved, a blur of amethyst. Her lead arm jabbed forward with startling speed, a strike designed to test his defense. He took a half step to the side and leaned his head. The strike passed harmlessly by his ear. Her forward momentum, committed and absolute, carried her past him. As she moved, he placed his foot where she would land. Celine, for all her training, stumbled over a janitor's orthopedic shoe. Her instincts converted the stumble into a graceful spin, intending to lash out with a low sweep of the leg, but Jonas already moved. He used her own spin to continue her rotation, placing a gentle hand on her back to guide her. She spun around a full 360 degrees, ending up exactly where she started, only now slightly off balance and facing the wrong way. A light tap on the back of her helmeted head. You're good, Jonas said, his voice calm and conversational. He stood behind her, having barely moved. Your technique is flawless, textbook. The problem is, your opponents rarely read the textbook. Celine stood rigid as she clenched her hands into fist. He had managed her, redirecting her own force with gentle guidance. Your style assumes your opponent will meet force with force, he continued, walking around to face her. You prepare for blocks, parries, counterattacks. You anticipate an adversary meeting power with power. Simple evasion leaves you open. He tapped his temple. You fight the body. I pay attention to the feet. A person's feet determine their path. He gestured at her magnificent armor. This armor is a hindrance. It's heavy, it's noisy. It tells your opponent exactly what you're going to do before you do it. In a duel of honor in some grand hall, it's impressive. In a dirty alley fight, it's a liability. He stated facts, his tone level. Saline stood motionless on the mat, the light tap on her head feeling heavier than any blow she had ever received. The vagrant docked at the shambles under a veil of anonymity. The bazaar was a swarm. Hundreds of ships, from derelict hulks to sleek private yachts, lashed together with magnetic clamps and jury-rigged umbilicals, forming a sprawling, chaotic asteroid colony. No central authority existed. Enforcement belonged to the biggest gun. The moment the Vigil's airlock opened, a wall of sensory information hit the team. The air was thick with the smells of sizzling alien meats, acrid smoke from faulty power couplings, and the scent of unrecycled sweat. Noise assaulted them from all sides. Vendors shouting in a dozen languages, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer on strange alloys, the thumping bass of music from a nearby cantina. Visually, the scene was a chaotic blur of flickering neon, belching steam pipes, and shifting, jostling crowds. Saline and her squad, clad in their immaculate armor, stepped onto the docking platform and became the instant center of attention. All activity within 50 meters ceased. The market's chaotic symphony faltered as hundreds of eyes turned